Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Very excited to have you join us today and very happy to be able to present to you today as well. We're really excited today to be joined by a friend and former colleague of mine, Sarah Smith at Georgetown University, and I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. But first, I'd like to get started with just a few notes about housekeeping and a few tips and reminders. First, today's webinar is being recorded, and we can make the recording available to you after the webinar. It'll also be up on our website at peoplegrove.com. Second, questions are welcomed and encouraged. So please type those questions in the questions box, and we will be sure to get to those throughout the presentation. We also have some time scheduled at the end for about 15 minutes of Q&A with Sarah. So please type those questions in throughout the presentation. And lastly, if you have any technical difficulties, you can type those difficulties in the questions box as well, and we will do our best to manage those as we go. But let's get started here and introduce myself real quick. My name is Matt Kelly. I work here at PeopleGrove in a business development capacity. But previous to this role, I worked for Georgetown University within the Alumni Association. And I was there for about 6 years. 3 of those years was actually managing our student to alumni networking community that we called Hoya Gateway. And I ran that program primarily through the PeopleGrove platform. And I, as I said, am thrilled to be joined here by Sarah Smith, my former colleague. And Sarah, I'll let you introduce yourself a bit here as well.
Thanks so much, Matt. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here speaking to everybody today. Hello from the hilltop. I'm the Senior Associate Director of Alumni Career Services here at Georgetown. I've been with Alumni Career Services now for a little over a year and a half. It'll be 2 years this fall. I've been with Georgetown's Office of Advancement for about 5 years, and so I've held a number of positions there, both in fundraising, volunteer management. I work directly with our undergraduate students as well, so I've kind of seen a big scope of goings on both on campus and then also in the alumni community. So I'm really excited to be here today and to share about our Alumni Career Services programming. And I look forward to hearing your questions and to hearing from you all.
Thank you, Sarah. So just a quick overview of our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit at a high level about the Alumni Career Services need that's developing across the country. If you were with us for our March webinar, you know we spoke with David Johnston at Kansas University, and we covered a lot of some of that information, and we're going to speak to that a little bit, give you kind of a little bit of a recap of what we talked about in March, but then primarily talked about the effect that has on programming. So many of our alumni associations, particularly at Georgetown, given my experience, and Sarah knows as well, additionally, is that programming is a primary piece of some of the association's work. And so we'll talk about how the need for career services amongst alumni is influencing some of that programming at a high level. And then we'll dive into the Hoya networking series. And I'm going to let Sarah kind of run most of the presentation there around the Hoya networking series, but this was a month-long strategic and very thoughtfully implemented series of programming during the month of March. So just recently concluded here. And so Sarah will dive into some of the planning, some of the metrics, some of the cross-silo collaboration that occurred with that networking series. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers towards the end of the program. So let's start with a quick poll question. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being more social and 5 being more educational, how would you describe the events run by your alumni association? So I'm going to open the poll here. Hopefully this works properly. There we go. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you describe the events run by your alumni association? Again, with 1 being more on the social range, 5 being more educational. I'll leave the poll open for about another 15 seconds here. Still have a couple votes coming in. Great. All right, so what we see here primarily is that 15% answered 1, 41% answered 2, 36% answered 3, 5% answered 4, and 3% answered 5. So it seems like we have more on the social range of things in terms of the events that are being managed by your alumni association, or even simply events that are planned for alumni. So what I'm going to talk about real quick right now on a very high level is this need amongst alumni for career services. Of the 175 partners that we work with here at PeopleGrove, we see a lot of our users are alumni. And what we see primarily is that alumni are not just there to serve as volunteers anymore. Alumni themselves are looking for some help. And a lot of that has to do with what 21st century alumni look like nowadays. So there's a paradigm shift happening with some of the alumni models here. Primarily what we are all traditionally used to is students receive career services while they're on campus, and the job of career services is to essentially place students in jobs and careers for their initial departure off of campus. And the career services office then trusts that they have then prepared that student for the economic shifts, different trends that might happen with the job market, and the student has to kind of rely on themselves to learn about how to navigate those shifts and navigate those different trends. We now see alumni coming back to their alma mater more for that continued support for three primary reasons here. Because one of the things we're seeing a lot of is post-traditional students. We're also seeing an increase in job switching amongst millennials and even other generations. And then finally, there is a need for reskilling. We're finding a lot of jobs that even that alumni are in currently didn't even exist 5 years ago. So I'm going to talk quickly at a high level here, and Sarah is going to chime in and share some of the things that she's seeing at Georgetown in these three different categories as well. So the first is post-traditional students. And the American Council of Education kind of defines post-traditional students as those over the age of 25 who are working full-time, financially independent, or connected to the military. So as you can see, it's a different shift from the typical university student, 18 to 22, who just leaving home for the first time. These are students who have some work experience already. These are students who have military experience as well. These are students that have different financial aid needs. And frankly, they're just older than the traditional university student that we've seen over the last 50 years. So those types of students are obviously going to have different needs after they graduate from college as well. And if you're thinking that these post-traditional students don't make up a large portion of the university undergraduate population, they actually make up more than half. So we see 13.3 million out of 23.1 million in the academic year 2011 and 2012. Sarah, are you seeing this at all at Georgetown? Or Georgetown tends to be more of a traditional type of undergraduate institution, but anything resonating here in terms of post-traditional students?
Yeah, so right, Georgetown is more of a traditional makeup, if you will, of what we typically think of in terms of undergraduate students. But a group that we do have that fits into this post-traditional student group is our military students, our students who are veterans, and so they're a large group who are served on campus. And even just looking at so our PeopleGrove platform that we use at Georgetown, as Matt mentioned, is called Hoya Gateway, and Hoya Gateway is it's a place where students and alumni can connect for mentorship opportunities, career conversations, and networking opportunities. And within that community, we have a Georgetown Military Network group, which allows both students and alumni, veterans, or service members to connect. And within that group, we see that's a heavily used group. It's a place of discussion. It's a place of connection. We have about 160 alumni identifying themselves in that group, and then 108 students who identify in that group too. So, not a humongous part of the population, but certainly an active one and an engaged one, and obviously one that we are concerned with serving through alumni career services, but also through our undergraduate career services too.
That's great. So switching gears a little bit now to the trends around job switching. Those of you who were with us in March may have recognized this slide and this stat, but we see that 21% of millennials have changed jobs within the past year, which is 3 times the number of non-millennials who report the same. The job switching trends among millennials is not necessarily, a very revealing stat. This is something that is pretty commonly reported on in terms of the marketplace. We'll take a look as well as some of these LinkedIn statistics. I think this is a really interesting illustration of how that trend is manifesting itself at specific companies as well. So if you look at some of the stats provided by LinkedIn here in 2016, you'll see that the number of companies that people have worked for in the last 5 years has nearly doubled. And I'm interested primarily here in this 2006-2010 graduate year. You can see that that's about 2.85 companies just in the first 5 years post-graduation. I'd be very interested to see, once this data is available from LinkedIn, the next 5 years for this particular band. As you can see, from 2001 to 2005, even the next 5 years after graduation, the number of companies that a particular person has worked for grew significantly as well. So I think this trend is going to continue, particularly among millennials. And interestingly, as we kind of dug in more into the research, the trend is pretty common across industries. So it's not like a specific industry might be, protected from this particular job switching trend, but it's happening across different functions, across different careers, across different industries. So it's a fairly common thing we're seeing amongst millennials. And as we all know, the millennial population is the one that is primarily right now entering that high earning, high potential phase of their career post-college graduation. And so they're the ones who, from an advancement perspective with many universities, are primary targets for potential research into capacity and potentially pledges. So millennials are a really important group to serve, particularly when it comes around to this job switching mentality. As people switch jobs, there's a certain amount of support that they need around that job switch, whether it's entering that new career, learning those new skills, learning a new office environment even. Are important things to be focused on when providing that type of education. Sarah, anything to add here about what you're seeing from Alumni Career Services at Georgetown?
Yeah, so it's anecdotal evidence. We don't have hard numbers on it, but one of the services that we offer through Alumni Career Services here at Georgetown is resume reviews. We offer resume and cover letter reviews, and so throughout the year. And it's interesting, we see a large number of millennials, so folks maybe who graduated from 2001 on, taking advantage of those review services. And then also, when you look at their resumes, they tend to have a lot more work experiences kind of in that category for shorter amounts of time than do our older alumni. And it's all, it's quality experience. It's not like just being a waitress or something like that. Like it's really, quality positions, but they're moving on more quickly than it seems our older alumni do. So I think that that's interesting, because it speaks to, they have more jobs over the same time period than other alumni do. So it's an interesting group to look at.
The last thing I wanted to cover here as part of our research into some of these trends is the need for reskilling. We've seen that, and this is from the World Economic Forum just this year, that in many industries and countries, people are working in positions that didn't exist even 5 or 10 years ago, and that pace is only increasing. This stat here, around that 65% of children entering primary school today will ultimately end up in completely new job types that don't exist yet. That's a very, very impactful number. To think about how many different types of jobs are constantly being created as new types of industries and the speed of technology constantly increases, it's important to think about how we can adjust our own services from an alumni career services perspective to make sure that we're providing educational opportunities for these folks to reskill. So, here's another quote from this same report, in that succeeding in such a labor market requires workers to be agile, lifelong learners, comfortable with continuous adaptation and willing to move across industries. If one profession becomes obsolete, a change that can happen virtually overnight, workers need to be able to shift nimbly into another. So being able to come back to a source of education in order to reskill is incredibly important for workers in today's environment and market. And this is what we're seeing with many of our partners. Sarah, sorry, I don't want to jump ahead real quick, but is there anything you wanted to add here to this point?
Yeah, sure. So another piece that we offer throughout the year as part of our Alumni Career Services portfolio of services are webinars. And after each webinar, we send out a survey asking for alumni to write in topics that they're interested in seeing. And so really kind of how we keep track of, what is happening in people's careers at the moment or of the times, and just some topics that people write in that I think speaks to this well, speaks to the reskilling part of this. topics requests that we've gotten recently are career transitions for older alumni, careers in retirement, mid-career changes, combating ageism, improving networking skills, transitioning back to work after raising kids, design thinking, and using technology in the workplace more effectively. So whether that's better organizing your email inbox or writing better emails overall or communicating better, or using, leading meetings through remote virtual ways to lead and manage teams. It's obvious people are wanting to keep up both with the trends, but then also looking for ways to continue their careers longer than they have before in the past.
So the question that kind of comes up often is when you look at these three different trends is, where are people going for this help? So often there are professional development functions run through specific companies. There's even a whole industry out there for career coaching and professional help. But I think a lot of people are turning back to their alma mater, which was the source of their first career services experience. They're turning back to their alma mater for that assistance. And we're seeing this a lot with our partners here at PeopleGrove. So if you were with us in March, you know that David Johnston of Kansas presented this graph from a survey that he did of his 43,000 alumni members within their alumni association. And you can see that this graph kind of illustrates that alumni are asking for more career assistance from their alumni association. What this graph is demonstrating is that the importance of providing career assistance actually was exceeding the performance at Kansas. And so, you can go back and take a look at our March webinar where David described how this survey really drove their strategic planning around being able to provide services to their alumni. So this is something that alumni are constantly asking for from their association. Interestingly, I think it's interesting to point out that mentoring students is second here in this Kansas survey. So there's also a desire and want for alumni to volunteer. So they're looking to be involved in career-related services, not just for themselves, but also for students. So there's a level of giving back that they're desiring out of their alumni association. Here's another stat that we found in some of the research for this webinar, particularly about the under 40 alumni community. So these are those millennials that we've been discussing. We see that 77% in this Cal survey in 2017 want to be able to network with alums in their related field, and 58% want professional developing programming. So professional growth opportunities in the under 40 alumni community are becoming more and more primary and more important across alumni associations. And these alumni are really looking to be those lifelong learners that the World Economic Forum discussed in terms of reskilling. But what's the cost of not being able to meet that need? So, the cost of if we fail to kind of adapt and be able to serve alumni in their career desires, is there a consequence? And some of the consequences can be seen here in this chart here from NBC News and New America around how alumni feel college is worth the cost. So if they're not in a satisfying career, if they're not in a career that is really helping them grow and helping them learn, we find that a lot of the perception around college is pretty negative. You can see even kind of the precipitous decline here between 2013 and 2017 around the perspective of, is college worth the cost? 56% answered positively in 2013, while only 39% answered positively in 2017. So these types of stats really indicate to us that there is a cost and consequence to not being able to meet the needs of alumni who return to the institution looking for that career support. So we have to kind of adjust the model. When we look at the new model, or at the old model rather, as I discussed earlier, it was that one-time job placement, and then the role of the Alumni Association was primarily in social events, maintaining connection to your institution by having a social gathering. So regional chapters tended to be the primary function, primary way that those events were planned and delivered. Whereas in the new model, during school, we're providing career services, and many offices are already making these changes, are starting to provide diverse support for students, ingratiate and grading career services into the academic world more so than has been in the past. And then the job of the Alumni Association seems to be to create ongoing lifelong learning opportunities for a changing economy, especially those who are looking to switch jobs or even careers every 1 to 3 years. So Another poll question here before we jump into some more details about Sarah's Hoya networking event. But I'm interested to know, what types of programming is your alumni association currently managing? So I got a couple notifications here in the question box that we have some folks who are primarily in career services. So for this question, kind of answer from that perspective. What types of services are you providing to alumni out of your career services office, if any? For those who are with us from alumni associations or alumni relations, interested to know what types of services you might be providing through that organization specifically. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll here.
Yeah, and I'm interested in seeing responses here, because these are actually all services that we offer as part of Georgetown's portfolio of services through Alumni Career Services. So curious to know how many of you on the line offer these as well. And then also, if you're offering items in addition to these, or things that are really unique that are outside of these, feel free to pop those into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel, because I'm interested to see what those are too.
You should also be able to select more than one option here when you go through. So, although that might not be working, as I see some folks picking coming in the questions box. Apologize for that. It looks like a pretty good range here, Sarah. You know, a lot of alumni to student mentorship and networking events being planned. Webinars a bit less so, but resume reviews for alumni would come in third in that list. So the first one would be alumni to student mentorship, second networking events, and third would be resume reviews for alumni.
Great, this is so neat to learn. Thanks for your responses.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Sarah for a bit here to talk a bit about the Hoya networking series and get into some more of the tactical pieces of planning these types of programming.
Awesome, thanks, Matt. So I'm so excited to share with y'all about Hoya Networking Series. It was as Matt mentioned earlier, a month of dedicated alumni career services programming, really designed to engage alumni in new and also existing programs for professional development, networking opportunities, career growth, and everything that we offer as part of our alumni career services portfolio. The program lasted the entire month of March 2019, and it ultimately ended up encompassing a total of 147 events throughout the month, which is a lot. A note on the name, and I bring this up because it was a sticking point for a bit of time. I know the word networking can often have a negative connotation and be off-putting and a little scary, but after going through lots of different name options, and I promise Matt knows I love coming up with punny names, I love coming up with engaging, exciting names, so I had a list of like 20 different names. This one was the one that we intentionally ended up going with because it does include that word networking. And that's really what we wanted to underscore with this month of programming, is that this really is about networking, whether that be building connections with Georgetown or with fellow Hoyas or with students, you know, at events virtually, by sending in your resume for review. It's all about making those connections. And so we really were intentional in naming it this. So I'll go ahead and dive into talking about the Hoya Networking Series. I'll take y'all through our goal setup and the planning and partnerships aspect of it. I'll talk a bit about the programs that we actually ended up offering. And then finally, I'll share out our results and evaluation of the program. So we can go ahead and talk about goals. So a bit of background, I learned about this concept of a month of dedicated alumni career services programs at the annual Alumni Career Services Network conference that was held last year in Nashville. And a shameless plug here, this year it's held in DC, July 21st through 23rd. And I really encourage y'all, if you're interested in alumni career services programming, I assume this is kind of your wheelhouse you work in. It's an amazing conference. I learned a ton last year. I look forward to learning even more this year. It's a great way to build your own network. So I encourage y'all to register and come join us in DC. So case in point, I learned there that Emory University and a couple other schools had done these dedicated months of career programs, raising awareness of their alumni career services programs, and then also increasing participation in their alumni career services programs, and that they'd seen just incredible results with it, and so spoke really highly of doing it. And so I thought that we should try something like that at Georgetown too. So the first order of business after that conference was really to bring this idea to my team and to my boss and to flesh out our programming ideas and goals. So I put together a white paper so that my boss and I could discuss what something like this might look like at Georgetown, both how to encompass our existing programs. So like I mentioned, our webinars, our resume review services. We also have a cadre of career coaching coaches, professional coaches who we partner with. Now this is the second year that we're doing that program. So how to leverage them and really capitalize upon their time and resources, but then also how to bring in new components of programming. So how to do events, how to increase the scope of our programming. So wanted to be really thoughtful about it. And that's kind of where we came up in those conversations with fleshing out these goals. So, in terms of looking at them, 10 events in 1 month. Event refers to any organized instance where alumni benefit from our planned programming. 500 alumni registered for programming during a month. That's kind of based on what we'd seen in terms of webinar numbers, in terms of regional events over the course of a month in the past. 25 speakers featured through events, again, based on looking at regional events that had done multiple events over the course of 1 month. Same with volunteer hosts and leaders and speakers, based upon regional events, and then also based upon what we were hoping to see for engagement from Hoya Gateway and from alumni within that system. 250 people attending in-person events. So again, based upon past regional events that we'd had. 20 companies engaged. We were hoping that we would at least get 20 alums to agree to host students in their offices for Hoya Gateway Power Lunches. And then 40 resumes reviewed during the month. That's high for us. We're pretty much averaging about 25 resume reviews a month. And so for us, we wanted to almost double that over the course of the month of March. Our resume review services are $30 a review. So that's either a resume or a cover letter is $30. For the month of March, we offered a 50% off discount. So $15 for resume or cover letter review from March 1st till March 31st. So really wanting to see people take advantage of that. And also kind of in all of our advertising saying these are all ways to participate. It's not just attending an in-person event. It's not just going to a webinar. Like, you can participate in a multitude of ways. So that was really important to us in our goal setting. Yeah.
Sorry, so just point of clarification from a question that came in from a participant. It sounds like these resume reviews they're one-on-one appointments, correct?
So actually, our resume review service, it's a good question that you asked. We actually outsource that. So we have she's a resume review consultant, if you will, who works only with us, solely with us. She's actually a former employee of Georgetown. And so we have her sign on to do resumes for us for a year at a time. Alumni send in their resumes through an online form that we have, and then she reviews their resumes and offers, it is individualized feedback. So she literally goes through and tracks changes in the Word document and then sends that back to the alum with personalized feedback, comments on different sections. So it is very personalized, but it is not an in-person one-on-one meeting. Yep. Other questions pertaining?
Well, it sounds like in setting your goals initially, particularly setting those KPIs, you're looking at past events and past interactions to set those goals, and then shooting higher, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And then it also sounds like you're already starting to look cross silos into other teams to use some of their registration as benchmark data. Is that right?
Yeah, that's definitely right. And our Alumni Career Services is unique. We sit, we're affiliated obviously with the Alumni Association. My boss and the director of our team also, in addition to supervising and managing Alumni Career Services, also manages the regional engagement team. So all of our regional events and regional engagement touch points throughout the year, she is also managing that team. So it provides a great piece of, way to partner between our two teams. And that was definitely something that we wanted to do this year with this program. It was something that had been mentioned at the Alumni Career Services Network conference, that these other schools have partnered with regional clubs. And so for us, again, as we're setting our goals, we wanted to be able to build out that partnership and implement it into our program. Another piece of this too is just during this goal setting conversation, and this is good background, I'll talk about it later, but during this goal setting conversation was really when we picked when we were going to do this, so picked the time period. And keep in mind, this is kind of towards the end of summer 2018. We're like, all right, March sounds perfect, you know, plenty enough away to give us time to plan all the programs, really get this advertised out there. It's not that busy in terms of the advancement calendar. You know, it's well before reunion. It's before, we have a big alumni weekend called John Carroll Weekend, typically right at the beginning of May. So it's well away from that. It's kind of a quiet time fundraising wise. And so for us, we thought March would be a great time. At the time it was, but I'll talk more about how that actually turned out in the evaluations part of this. Other questions about our goals before I move on to discussing our planning and structure?
I've got a lot of questions currently coming in. Some, does 250 people include webinars? If not, how many webinars?
Yeah, good question. So 250 people, this is attending in-person events. So this is really attending those regional career events that we had going on throughout, that we wanted to have going on throughout the country and throughout the world.
Mm-hmm. Here's a real great question about balance. The huge staff commitment to doing all this in 1 month. So how are you kind of balancing the staff commitment here, alumni fatigue? You know, what does it mean kind of for the rest of the program coming up for the rest of the year?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question and one that I can definitely speak to. As Matt mentioned, and this is actually interesting to talk about, as Matt mentioned, he worked at Georgetown prior to coming to PeopleGrove, and he actually departed us in November. And so I absorbed the Hoya Gateway duties as well. So in addition to my regular Alumni Career Services duties, I was also managing Hoya Gateway. And so obviously, you know, in terms of capacity, bandwidth, taking on an entire month's worth of programming when you're one person short-staffed is not the ideal, but we really wanted to do this. You know, this was something we were eager to do and eager to dive into, and we'd seen other schools do it, and so we're like, why not? You know, we can totally do this. In terms of how to balance this out with the rest of the programs we had going on this, you know, over the course of a year, we continually throughout the year we offer webinars, and so for me, I didn't feel like offering 4 throughout the month of March was that much of a reach. That's pretty standard for us. In terms of the regional career events, that was really where my partnership with the regional team came in. I worked with my partner there to kind of set up, okay, here's what I'm envisioning, here's what you're envisioning, let's make this happen, and you're really driving the ship there. So really just trusting her and that team to manage those events was really important. And then, for the rest of the programs, I won't lie, it certainly was a lot, juggling the power lunches, juggling the volunteers, the hosts, making sure the resume reviews were getting done in the amount of time that we said they were going to do. It takes a lot, but you stay on it and kind of just make it your life for a solid month, and we made it through. So a lot of lessons learned from that, in terms of capacity and in terms of spreading ourselves out throughout the rest of the year. But overall, it was a great experience and something we want to look to do again.
I'm seeing a number of questions come in, and because I've peeked ahead at your content, I know you're going to get to some of this. So particularly around the planning and partnerships, there's a lot of questions around how responsibilities were managed between staff, volunteers, et cetera. So perhaps you might be able to cover that in this slide here.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of planning and partnerships, I wanted to take you all through just generally our chronology in terms of how we came to putting this together, and kind of who our key partners were and stakeholders were who were involved in this. So by fall 2018, once my boss and I and team kind of had a more fully baked idea of what the scope of this program would look like, we actually brought this concept to our Alumni Association Board of Governors Career Services Committee. And our Board of Governors is the governing body of Georgetown's Alumni Association. And so I actually work with a subcommittee of that group, the Career Services Committee, so about 15 alumni. And they're responsible for working with me to develop, promote, evaluate, and our annual lineup of alumni career services programs. So the governors are really mouthpieces of all the programming that we do. They are the alumni to alumni connection. They're the ones who really help to add meat to our programming and then also to advertise it and spread the word to fellow alums. So having their buy-in, having them feel ownership, having them feel passionate about this and seeing the value in doing a dedicated month of career services programming was really important. So we certainly spent a good amount of time, working with them, kind of helping them to see the vision of this. And thankfully, they were very much on board. This really lit a fire underneath them. They were excited about it, and just, constantly like, how can I help? What can I be doing? How can I spread the word on social media? Who can I tell to participate? So that was great. In fall and winter of 2018, that was when really the bulk of the program planning itself happened. So that was when I was really working with our regional engagement partners to reach out to regional clubs to get an idea of the type of programming the clubs were interested in doing. So the clubs came to us with, hey, we're the Club of Philly and we want to do a panel on the Jesuit values in your career, and we want to do it on this date. And we would say, okay, that sounds great, go forth and conquer. So that was kind of that time, working with my regional partner to set up those programs. And then I was also working to set up our webinars, to set up our Hoya Gateway Power Lunches, to set up working with our career coaching partners to figure out their schedules for micro coaching sessions that we did, and really just lining up and getting together the bulk of that programming. And then early 2019 was when we started promotion of the program itself. So we actually had a website built for us by our advancement communications team. They built us a web page. It's alumni.georgetown.edu/Hoya networking series. If you're interested in looking at it, it's still up. You can see it. And it was important to us that we had a dedicated web page to house all of these programs, so that we could drive alumni to a central place for registration. And then we started marketing emails in February, just broadcast emails to alumni, all alumni. We would kind of segment them out based on if they'd elected to receive career services emails, if they'd elected to receive regional engagement emails, things like that. But really starting to market it, starting the countdown, getting this idea of Hoya Networking Series in people's heads in February was important to us, so that in March, it was really just off and running. And then, March was all about running the programming itself, social media promotion, keeping this brand visible, and really, just making sure that the programming was going along as successfully and as effectively as we had envisioned. In terms of this list of partners who I list here, like I said, during the planning process, we knew we wanted to work across silos. It was really important to us, like I'd mentioned, to work with our regional engagement partners, but then we also wanted to be able to work with development officers, and to be able to work too with our class programs and reunion campaigns team. They are known as CPARC. They're a large team, and each person on that team manages a portfolio of 5 alumni classes. And so I actually used to work on that team. And so I knew how important it was to get them on board with our programming so that they then could be spreading the word to their classes and getting information about our programming in class newsletters, on class Facebook pages. It was just really important that we kind of infiltrated all the channels that we could to get this in front of alumni and to get alumni to sign up. And then, the month was, like I'd mentioned, really about capitalizing upon the tried and true things that we've done, our webinars, our great content always, and resume reviews, but then adding new things and just making sure, like I said, that those were running as efficiently and as well as they possibly could run. So kind of keeping everything going throughout the month of March was exciting to see it actually happen after all the work that we've done through the fall and spring to make it happen.
So we have two main questions for some of the participants here. One a little bit more tactical and one a little bit more high level. The first one is around, I'll start with the tactical one. In terms of the planning and execution of events, with the regional engagement team and then yourself and then any, on-site, even, these power lunch hosts, how did you manage those responsibilities and kind of delegate? And then, what were the duties of each of those different constituents?
Yeah, so in terms of our regional engagement partners, I'm lucky because that team literally sits next to us in my office. And so it was really easy to have one-on-one meetings and check-ins with my regional engagement counterpart, who is the point of contact for these events. And so she and I would meet about every 2 weeks leading up to these, and I would just want to check in. How's our event in Austin coming along? How's our event in Los Angeles coming along? I was really depending on her to have kind of a lockdown as to how all of those were going. And to be honest, my view was that regional knows how to do regional events. I don't know how to do regional events. I know how to do alumni events the way that I do alumni events, but they're very different. And so really just trusting and saying, okay, they have a model, it works well, let's go with their model, and being, again, keeping those channels of communication open, but being willing to have them really drive it. That was really how I did it. If I had been integrally involved in planning every single regional event in addition to everything else going on, that just would have been way too much, way too many things to keep tabs on. So it was really important to me to have that partnership. Additionally, with the other programs that we had going on, the micro coaching and the power lunches were kind of similar in that I was constantly going back and forth with people to double check, does this date work for you? Okay, I'm confirming for this date. Does this schedule work for you? And so really it was all, I'm a well-organized person. And so is staying organized and doing my due diligence and follow up, and making sure that the biggest piece of it all was making sure that I was in communication with the people who I needed to be in communication with. I always wanted to be anticipatory in terms of my alumni event hosts, that they were never going to reach out to me and say, hey, what's happening? I haven't heard anything. Do we have students registering for this event? I always wanted to be the one reaching out to them. So I kind of set up a schedule as to here's when the emails are going to go out to event hosts, letting them know who's registered, how things are looking. And I just really made myself stick to that. That was important.
And then the last question here on this piece, and this is a little bit more high level, is, when you work with folks in the development team and the CPARC team, those are all fundraising entities of the university. Yep. So when you are kind of selling them on this networking series, are you connecting some of the outcomes of these events to philanthropic goals? And then how are you tracking how that proceeds post-event?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, we need to be doing a better job of that tracking piece. I think the selling point is this is engagement, and it's engagement for engagement's sake. It's helping to build the pipeline. I think development officers, for the most part, the ones who I work with regularly anyway, really know that there are two sides to it. There is the direct ask and the fundraising and the numbers side, but the alumni also need to feel just loved by their alma mater. They need to feel that kind of warm, fuzzy connection. And that's really where we in Alumni Career Services can kind of help with managed prospects and with that development piece. And so for me, in terms of working with DOs, it really was all about engagement. And it's a nice feeling to be able to say, yeah, we can help organize a lunch with your managed prospect and 15 students. And that's an amazing way that they can give back to Georgetown without making a financial contribution, of any kind. And it's just a time for them to be able to connect with current students, or to be able to come to an event and connect with fellow alumni, or to speak on a panel and speak with fellow alumni. So really for us, it's all about offering that engagement touch point, because I think oftentimes that's something that DOs are looking for. And so being able to fulfill that role was great for us.
Great. We have a lot of questions coming in about some of the programming. So I think
That's my favorite part to talk about.
In the remaining 15 minutes, let's make sure we get through all of the content.
Yeah, I'll try and be really speedy. So I'll talk just about the programming. So ultimately, the entire month of March was comprised of 4 webinars, 12 regional career events, a week of micro-coaching sessions, a week of Hoya Gateway power lunches, which I actually have a separate slide on those, so I'll table talking about those for a minute, and then ongoing resume reviews throughout the month. So we had regional events all over the place. We had panels and speakers and networking events, et cetera, everywhere from Austin, Texas to New York to Los Angeles to Tokyo to New Delhi to DC to Philly. I mean, everywhere, which was just great to see that representation among our regional clubs. We offered a webinar once a week on a different topic that was widely appealing and that would work for a broad audience. I was really intent on that this needs to be broad reaching and appeal to alums from all ages, at all stages in their careers. So those 4 webinar topics, we had using emotional intelligence to navigate office politics, interviewing like a talk show host, making clear, powerful requests and getting what you want, and then writing and your personal brand. So a variety of topics. And then during the week of March 18th through the 22nd, so the 3rd week of this, we offered micro-coaching sessions. And these sessions featured 8 of our career coaching partners. And these folks are certified career and leadership coaches who partner with the Alumni Association every year. This is the 2nd year they've done this. To offer discounted services to alumni. And then they also participate in ongoing programming for us. So we require that they host at least one webinar over the course of the year and contribute to our blog. And collectively, these 8 career coaching partners offered 91 30-minute sessions to alumni. So that's 45 hours worth of coaching that they offered over the course of a week, which was incredible. And then during those sessions, alumni—
in person or virtually, Sarah?
So those were hosted combination. 3 of our coaches offered sessions here in the Alumni House for alumni to come meet personally, and then 5 offered them virtually. So through Zoom, combination of both. Alums worked on specific career issues, and it really just gave alumni an insight into this world of professional coaching. That program specifically, micro-coaching, was brought to us by one of our alumni volunteers on the Board of Governors, and she had seen something like that at her office, and she was like, we have to try something like this. So that, again, is really a partnership. Without her, without that alumni committee buy-in, we never would have done a program like this. So it, again, just vital to have their buy-in and feeling ownership. So that was an incredible program.
And then I think it's cool to also point out that the career coaches themselves are alums of the university.
So the career coaches themselves, they're certified through Georgetown has, through our School of Continuing Studies, a coaching certificate program. So in addition to the other certificates that they hold, they are graduates of Georgetown's coaching program. So yes, so they are alumni in effect, which is great because it gives them, they've had that Georgetown classroom experience. Many of them are adjunct professors or come in to teach a course every once in a while or do coaching capacity services in some other capacity. So they really have this like Georgetown feel to them, and they immediately understand where alumni are coming from, which is invaluable. So that's just an extra layer added with that program.
And your other featured speakers, was there anyone who wasn't an alum, or did y'all try to keep it in the Hoya family?
We definitely tried to keep it in the Hoya family. I know that for a couple of our regional events, we had who we call Hoya friends. So, it's someone who an alum knows who says they're just fantastic, we have to have them, or it's someone, who's hosted a webinar for us in the past who's not an alum, something like that. But no, the majority of our program, featured speakers, most of them were alumni. I would say out of everyone, we maybe had 4 who were not alums.
Great.
I do want to talk quickly about the Hoya Gateway Power Lunches just as a piece of the programming. So if you can, yeah, perfect. So this is a program we've offered before during winter break for students and alumni to meet in alumni offices across the country for lunch. We decided to do it this year during spring break so that we could include it as part of Hoya Networking Series. I manage this entire program through our PeopleGrove platform, Hoya Gateway. So I sent out a call for alumni power lunch hosts directly through Hoya Gateway. I built individual events. You can see these tiles. Each one of those is an event. And then once you clicked into it, you'd see this additional information, where it is, the map description of who's hosting it, the alum hosting it, and then solicited student signups through Hoya Gateway as well. So all managed through the platform. And that made it really easy for me then to filter by registrants, use the mass email tool to contact registrants, and to contact event hosts as well. So just really seamless. Overall, we had 41 alumni volunteer to host power lunches, and we ended up holding 36 power lunches. So we canceled a couple due to lack of student signups, but all in all, these lunches engaged 164 students, which was great over the course of a week. And I got some awesome pieces of anecdotal feedback from the students, who made these wonderful alumni connections and got internships and, future job recommendations, things like that. So great program, and that's something we'll definitely continue to do.
Myself and one of PeopleGrove's co-founders actually hosted one here at PeopleGrove as well, and it was great. It was awesome to meet you in person. Yeah. And
I was going to say too, this is a great, I mentioned development officers earlier. This was an amazing way to work with DOs. They would come to me and say, I have this BlackRock one is a perfect example. We have an alumni there who is very, very senior at BlackRock, and she wanted to host a power lunch. And so that was an easy way for her. She had a group of 15 students come and meet with her. Incredibly easy piece of engagement, incredibly easy way for her to give back to Georgetown. And just a really nice, worked with her DO, kept her on copy throughout the whole process, and it just turned out really well for everybody. So that's a great way to partner with our development officers, is through these programs.
And primarily this is a student-focused event, correct?
Yes, that's right. Student focused. So these lunches are only for students, both undergraduate and graduate. So yeah, really providing that bridge between alumni and students for this part of the program.
Yeah, and they're all free for students as well, correct?
Yep, correct. All right, so the last piece I wanted to talk through, and I'm keeping an eye on time, sorry, is just our accomplishments and kind of the evaluation of how our programming turned out. So overall, we surpassed our goals, which is incredible. We ended up with 147 events, including micro-coaching sessions, webinars, and regional events, 1,500 alumni engagement touch points. Those are not unique alumni specifically, but engagement touch points is what we look at. 73 alumni event hosts and speakers. So those include power lunch hosts, panelists, speakers, webinar hosts, etc. 72 resumes reviewed is a record number of resume reviews for us, so we were thrilled to see that. And then 60 companies engaged. Those are Hoya Gateway power lunches and event speakers. Specifically feedback in terms of evaluating our programming. So I surveyed all of our micro-coaching session participants, the alums, and we heard that 74% of micro-coaching participants surveyed said they would participate in micro-coaching sessions again, which is great to hear. And then I thought this was interesting. It harkens back to what Matt was discussing earlier on the webinar, but the 4 biggest topics that alumni sought assistance for in these micro-coaching sessions were job seeking and applying and career pivoting, returning to the workforce after having a child, leadership development, and workplace anxiety. So I just thought that was interesting that kind of those fit well with what you were discussing earlier in the webinar. In terms of key lessons learned, the things that we'll consider for the future, timing. March actually turned out to be a terrible time for us to do this. We had a huge event at the end of March, the Women's Forum, Georgetown Women's Forum. It's a 500-person event at the DC Convention Center this year, and we just severely underestimated how much capacity it would take from our whole team to do both Hoya Networking Series and that during the month of March. Additionally, there was a fundraising competition, kind of 24-hour giving challenge happening in the middle of March, which just really meant that alums were kind of inundated with emails throughout the course of the month of March. Register for Women's Forum, participate in Hoya Networking Series, give to Georgetown. So there was just a lot coming at them. So something for us to keep in mind for the future. Advertising. As the month went on, we learned that segmenting our communications and making them as personal as possible was vital. Specifically, it was interesting to see that Alumni Career Services is not necessarily a household name all over the place. So we're still, and I kind of feel like that's a trend among the industry, but it's certainly at Georgetown that Alumni Career Services, we're kind of still building who we are and making our presence publicly known. And so trying to have, just even thinking of having Georgetown appear as the sender or in the subject line as opposed to Alumni Career Services to get that open rate up was really important. So definitely, again, making it as personal a message as possible and splitting it out based upon cities as well. Austin is a different demographic and a different feel than New York. So just really being cognizant of that. And then lastly, partnerships. As I've mentioned, overall, it was wonderful to work across teams and across silos and to kind of trust fellow partners and, have them be managing the programming pieces so that I didn't have to do it all. But there's always room for improvement there. It can always be made a better partnership in terms of really establishing expectations from the get-go, checking in on those with respect to those throughout the process. And so that's something that I certainly want to be better at as we move forward and look to do this again, is really just laying out expectations and sticking to them, making sure that we're adhering to those. Just keeping in mind that people operate differently in terms of pushing numbers, growing numbers of attendees for an event or advertising events, and working with those expectations. So that's important. And overall, last thing that I'll say is this was a great experience for us. We certainly will be looking to do it again. I don't totally know when yet in the academic calendar, but we'll definitely be looking to do it again this coming year. And we learned a lot from it. So I'm glad we added it this year and tried it out.
Great. Well, Sarah, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been fantastic, and I really appreciate you sharing everything with our attendees today. I'm going to just leave up this slide here. I'm actually going to come back to the slide for a moment so that you can have both Sarah and my contact information. Sarah has generously offered to answer any questions. I know there are a number of questions that we weren't able to get to today, and I do apologize for that, but Sarah has generously offered some of her resources and time to answer those questions for you. Before I leave this slide up, though, I do want to say that we have a couple things coming up on our end at PeopleGrove. Take a look out for the Growing Alumni Career Services Need white paper. A lot of the research that I presented at the beginning of today's webinar, we're publishing in an upcoming research paper. And so we're very excited to get that out, and please keep an eye out for that. Our next webinar is going to be May 16th, and we're going to have Alexa Hamill and AJ Arenstein from Barnard College speak about women's programming. So we're very excited for that coming up on May 16th. This link is now active, so please feel free to go ahead and register for that webinar if you're interested, and we'll look forward to presenting that on May 16th. And then my shameless plug for our conference, as Sarah got her ACSN in one, we have our own PeopleGrove Innovators Conference coming up July 16th and 17th here in San Francisco, being hosted by one of our partners here at the Wharton San Francisco campus. So we're very excited to welcome you all in. We have over 120 registrants so far, and our space is filling up very quickly. So if you're interested in joining us out here in San Francisco, please do register. And now I'm going to flip back to this slide here just so that you can have our contact information there. I'm Matt at peoplegrove.com, and Sarah is SLA49 at georgetown.edu. I'm also happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding PeopleGrove. Sarah's been nice enough to share some of the impact that this series had on Georgetown's PeopleGrove platform with me, including some data. So I'm happy to speak to that, as well as some of the Power Lunch questions. I actually managed that program before I left Georgetown as well. So if you have any specific questions on that, I'm happy to lighten Sarah's load regarding that topic. But I want to thank everyone today for their participation. I really appreciated everyone joining us today. And Sarah, again, thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And please do feel free to reach out with questions. I'm on LinkedIn too. Feel free to connect with me. And I hope to see some of you in July at the Alumni Career Services Network Conference or the PeopleGrove Conference. I'll be there too. So thanks again for having me, Matt. This has been so fun.
Thanks, Sarah. Much appreciated. Have a great day, everyone.